He wasn't supposed to be chosen. Not for a child. Not for a second chance. Not after what they said he did. The hallway smelled faintly of antiseptic and something colder, like metal left too long in the dark, and Officer Daniel Hayes walked slowly beside his daughter, counting each step the way he had learned to do ever since silence replaced her sight. One foot, then the other, steady, measured, like patrol on unfamiliar ground, and Lily's small hand rested lightly in his, not gripping, just there, as if she had already learned that holding too tight didn't bring anything back. The shelter was quiet for a Saturday morning, fluorescent lights humming overhead, casting a pale wash across rows of kennels where dogs shifted and stirred, nails clicking softly against concrete. A low chorus of life waiting to be chosen. But Lily didn't turn her head toward the sounds, didn't smile the way other children might. She simply listened, her face calm in a way that didn't belong to someone so young. And Daniel felt that ache again. The one that sat just behind his ribs, the one he couldn't outrun. Because there was a time when she used to laugh at everything. When the world was still bright and simple and filled with colors he could no longer describe without breaking something inside himself. "You ready, kiddo?" he asked quietly, his voice steady but softer than it used to be, and she nodded, a small motion, almost invisible. "I want one that feels kind," she said, and the word lingered between them like something fragile, something neither of them quite knew how to hold anymore. They passed the first row of dogs, golden retrievers with polished coats and eager tails, trained, perfect, bred for purpose, each one stepping forward as if rehearsed, as if they already knew how to be exactly what someone needed. And Daniel paused, watching, because this was what they came for, a guide dog, reliable, proven, safe, something he could trust to walk beside his daughter when he couldn't, something that wouldn't fail her the way life already had. But Lily didn't stop. She tilted her head slightly, listening, then shook it once. "Not them," she whispered, and Daniel frowned, glancing down at her. "Why not?" But she didn't answer right away, just kept walking, her fingers brushing lightly against the air as if searching for something unseen, something deeper than sound. And then, as they reached the far end of the hallway, the noise began to fade, fewer barks, fewer movements, until there was only a heavy stillness waiting at the last corner. And even before Daniel saw it, he felt it, that shift in the air, like stepping into a room where something had already decided not to hope anymore. A small metal sign hung crooked on the final kennel, the number barely visible under a strip of worn tape. Cage 12, and inside, in the dimmest patch of shadow, a German shepherd lay curled against the back wall, its body turned away, as if the world outside the bars no longer existed. No wagging tail, no lifted ears, just stillness, deep and unmoving, like a memory no one wanted to revisit. And Daniel exhaled slowly, instinct tightening his chest, because he had seen that kind of silence before, not in dogs, but in men, the kind that came after something broke in a place no one could reach. And he was about to guide Lily past it, to keep her moving towards something safer, something easier, when she stopped. Her hand slipped gently from his, and without hesitation, she stepped closer to the cage, her small fingers brushing against the cold metal bars. And for a moment, nothing happened. The dog didn't move, didn't react, didn't even acknowledge her presence. But Lily tilted her head again, listening not with her ears, but with something else, something quieter. And then she whispered, barely, louder than breath, "He's not broken, he's just alone." And Daniel felt something shift, subtle but undeniable, like the first crack in a wall he thought would never give. Because inside that cage, the dog's ear twitched, just once, almost imperceptible, but enough to say that somewhere, deep beneath the silence, something was still listening. Daniel did not speak right away because he had learned that some moments, if interrupted too quickly, would vanish like breath on cold glass. And Lily stood there with her hand resting against the metal, her fingers still, her face tilted slightly, as if she were listening to something beneath the silence, something deeper than sound. And inside the cage the German shepherd remained motionless except for that one small shift, an ear turning toward her voice, uncertain, cautious, like a memory, deciding whether it was safe to return. A staff member approached from behind them, her footsteps soft but deliberate, the faint jingle of keys at her side breaking the stillness just enough to remind the world it was still moving. "I would not recommend that one," she said gently, not unkind, but practiced, the tone of someone who had repeated the same sentence too many times to too many hopeful people, and Daniel straightened slightly, instinctively stepping closer to Lily, his hand hovering near her shoulder. Protective, measured. "Why not?" he asked, though part of him already understood the answer before it came. The woman glanced toward the cage, then back at them, lowering her voice as if the dog could understand disappointment. "He used to be a working canine, trained, disciplined, one of the best we had. But something changed. He stopped responding to commands, stopped trusting handlers. He would not guide, would not engage, just shut down. We tried rehabilitation, but some dogs, they do not come back the way they were." Her words settled heavily in the air, not harsh, just final, like a door quietly closing. Daniel nodded once, slow, absorbing it, because he knew what it meant when someone said a thing could not be fixed. He had heard it before in different rooms, different voices, after the accident. After the long nights in the hospital when doctors spoke carefully around his daughter, as if hope itself needed permission to stay, and he felt that familiar pull again, the instinct to choose what was safe, what was certain, what would not break further under his watch. "We should look at the others," he said softly, turning slightly toward Lily, but she did not move, her hand still resting against the cold bars, her small fingers now curling just enough to feel the shape of them, grounding herself in something real. "He is still here," she said, her voice quiet but steady, and Daniel frowned, not understanding. "Of course he is, honey," he replied gently, but she shook her head, a small, certain motion. "No. I mean he did not leave." And something in the way she said it made the air shift again, subtle, but undeniable, like a truth spoken too simply to ignore. Inside the cage, the dog's head lifted a fraction, not fully, not enough to meet her, but enough to show that he was listening, that somewhere beneath the weight of whatever had silenced him, there was still a thread connecting him to the world beyond those bars. And Lily slowly lowered herself to her knees, her movements careful, unafraid, her hand sliding down until her fingers brushed the edge of the concrete floor just inside the cage, close enough to feel the faint warmth of another living being. "Hi," she whispered, not asking for anything, not expecting anything, just offering the word like a place to rest. And for a long second nothing happened, the kind of second that stretches longer than it should, filled with doubt, with the quiet pressure of everyone watching and waiting for something to prove itself. But then, almost imperceptibly, the dog shifted again, his nose moving forward just enough to catch her scent. A slow, cautious breath drawn in, and Daniel felt it in his chest before he fully saw it. That fragile, impossible thing beginning to form, not a command, not training, not obedience, but something older, something simpler, the beginning of trust. And it was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was just a broken dog choosing, for the first time in a long time, not to turn away. Daniel exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that carried more weight than air, because what he was watching did not fit into anything he could control, and control was the one thing he had been holding on to ever since the world shifted beneath his feet, ever since he learned that no amount of strength or training could fix what had already been taken. And yet here, in a dim corner of a shelter, his daughter was doing something he could not explain, something that did not follow rules or logic, and it unsettled him in a way he could not name. "Lily," he said gently, kneeling beside her now, his voice careful, measured. "He is not trained anymore. He might not be able to help you the way you need." And he chose his words with precision, not wanting to take this moment away from her, but also not wanting to let hope grow in a place where it might not survive. And Lily tilted her head slightly toward him, though her hand never left the edge of the cage. "I do not need him to be perfect," she said softly, as if the idea itself was unnecessary, and Daniel felt that sentence settle somewhere deep inside him, uninvited but undeniable. Behind them, the staff member shifted her weight, watching with a quiet concern. "Sir, I understand this is emotional, but guide dogs require specific temperament and reliability. This one, he cannot even complete basic navigation tasks anymore. He freezes, he withdraws. He does not respond under pressure." Her words were not cold, but they were firm, grounded in reality, and Daniel nodded again, because he respected that, he needed that, the structure of it, the certainty, the idea that there was a right choice and a wrong one. And he stood slowly, running a hand along the back of his neck as if trying to ease the tension there. "We came here for something she can depend on," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. And he turned his gaze back toward the brighter rows of kennels, where well-trained dogs waited with attentive eyes and steady posture, ready to serve, ready to succeed. Everything this one was not. But behind him, Lily shifted closer, her knees pressing gently against the floor, her fingers now resting just inside the threshold of the cage, not reaching too far, not forcing anything, just existing within reach. And the German shepherd moved again, slowly this time, his head lifting just enough to reveal one amber eye, dull but searching, and he did not look at Daniel, did not look at the staff member. He looked only toward the small presence that had not asked anything of him, had not expected anything, and that was new, unfamiliar, something his instincts did not know how to reject. "What is his name?" Lily asked, her voice steady, and the staff member hesitated for a brief moment, as if the answer carried more than just a label. "Rex," she said finally, and the name lingered in the space, simple, strong, belonging to something that once had purpose, and Lily repeated it under her breath. Rex, like she was learning the shape of it, memorizing it the way she now memorized everything she could not see. And then she smiled, small but real, the first hint of warmth Daniel had seen on her face in weeks. "Hi Rex," she whispered again, and this time, the dog did not stay still. His body shifted forward just an inch, cautious, uncertain, but willing, and Daniel felt something inside his chest tighten, not with fear, but with recognition, because he had seen that movement before, not in animals, but in people who had been told they were beyond repair, people who had learned to stop trying until something, or someone, gave them a reason to move again. And he realized, standing there between what was safe and what was real, that this choice was no longer about finding the best dog. It was about understanding what his daughter had already seen without sight, that sometimes the ones who cannot perform are the ones who understand the dark the most, and that understanding might be the only thing she truly needed. Daniel stood there longer than he should have, caught between two worlds that did not seem to belong together, one built on training, discipline, and predictable outcomes, and the other unfolding quietly in front of him, where a child who could not see had already chosen something no manual would ever recommend. And he felt the weight of that decision pressing in from both sides, the voice of reason telling him to walk away, to choose safety, to choose certainty, while something quieter, something harder to ignore, reminded him that certainty had never once saved him from loss. The staff member stepped closer, her expression softening slightly as she watched Lily and the dog. "Sir, I can show you 3 excellent candidates that have completed full guide certification. They are calm, responsive, tested in real environments," she said, gesturing gently toward the brighter section of the facility where movement and energy still lived, and Daniel nodded instinctively, because that was what he came for, what he had promised himself he would bring home, something dependable, something that would not fail when it mattered most. And he took a small step back, ready to guide Lily with him. But her voice stopped him before he could speak. "Dad," she said, not loud, not urgent, just certain. And he looked down at her, really looked this time, at the way her hand remained steady, the way her shoulders were relaxed, not tense, not afraid, and it struck him how different she seemed in this moment, how present, how grounded, as if she had found something solid in a world that had taken so much from her. "He is trying," she added quietly, and Daniel followed her gaze, though she had none, and saw it again, that small shift in the dog's posture. Rex now sitting up just enough that his silhouette no longer blended completely into the shadows, his ears not fully raised but no longer pressed flat, his attention fixed on the girl who had not turned away. And it was not dramatic, not the kind of transformation that demanded belief. It was subtle, almost fragile, the kind of change that could be missed if someone was not paying attention, and Daniel realized that he had almost missed it. He crouched slowly, lowering himself to Lily's level, his movements deliberate, as if approaching something that required care rather than control, and he extended his hand slightly toward the cage, not reaching all the way in, just enough to offer presence. And Rex's eyes flicked toward him for the briefest second, guarded, assessing, before returning to Lily, and Daniel felt that too. The unspoken boundary, the understanding that whatever bridge was forming here, it did not belong to him yet. What if he cannot do what you need? Daniel asked softly, not as a challenge, but as a father trying to protect what little he could still protect. And Lily smiled again, faint but steady. Then we will learn together, she said, as if the answer had always been that simple. And Daniel closed his eyes for a brief moment, because those words carried a weight he had been avoiding. The idea that not everything needed to be fixed before it could be loved, that not everything needed to be certain before it could be trusted, and when he opened them again, the decision was already forming, not from logic, not from training, but from something deeper, something he had once relied on before the world taught him to doubt it. He stood slowly, turning to the staff member, his voice calm, but firm in a way that left little room for argument. We would like to meet him outside the cage. And the woman hesitated, just for a second. The kind of hesitation that comes from knowing what is expected and seeing something unexpected unfold. And then she nodded, reaching for the keys at her side, the soft metallic sound echoing through the quiet hallway. And as she stepped toward cage 12, Lily's fingers curled slightly against the bars, her breath steady, her presence unwavering. And inside, Rex shifted forward another inch. Not because he was commanded, not because he was trained, but because for the first time in a long time, someone had chosen him without asking him to be anything else. The sound of the lock turning was quiet, almost too quiet for something that carried so much weight, a soft metallic click that seemed to echo longer than it should, and Daniel felt his chest tighten as the staff member slowly pulled the cage door open, not wide, just enough to give space, enough to offer a choice, and she stepped back immediately, careful, respectful, as if she understood that whatever happened next could not be forced. Rex did not move at first, his body still low, still guarded, his eyes fixed on the opening but not rushing toward it, not eager, just watching, measuring, the way something broken learns to survive by waiting. And Daniel stayed where he was, not stepping forward, not calling out, because every instinct he had from years of training told him that pressure would close this moment faster than fear ever could. Lily remained kneeling, her small frame steady, her hand now resting lightly against the edge of the open door, not reaching in, not pulling back, just present, and the air between them felt suspended, like the space between two breaths where everything could still change. It is okay, she whispered, her voice soft but certain, not a command, not a plea, just an offering. And for a long second nothing shifted, the dog's muscles remained tense, his weight still anchored to the floor behind him. But then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, he leaned forward, one paw sliding across the concrete, then stopping, as if testing whether the ground itself would hold. And Daniel felt that movement in his bones, because he knew what it meant to take a step when every part of you expected to fall. Another inch, then another. Rex moved carefully, his body low, his head slightly down, not submissive, not fearful, just uncertain. And when he reached the threshold of the cage, he paused again, his nose lifting just enough to catch Lily's scent more clearly. And the world seemed to narrow to that single point of contact, the distance between a hand and a breath. Lily did not rush, did not reach further. She simply turned her palm upward, open, patient, and for a moment Daniel forgot to breathe, because he realized that this was not about training or commands or expectations. This was something else entirely, something that could not be taught, only given. And Rex stepped forward one final inch, closing the space, his nose brushing lightly against her fingers, a single point of contact, fragile, electric, real. Lily smiled, not wide, not bright, but deep, the kind of smile that comes from recognition rather than sight, and she whispered, "Hi Rex," again, as if the moment needed no other words, and the dog exhaled softly, a quiet release that seemed to carry more than just air, as if something inside him had loosened for the first time in a long while. Daniel watched it happen and felt something inside himself shift with it, something he had been holding tight without realizing. Because this was not the kind of success he understood, there was no checklist, no confirmation, no guarantee, just a small, undeniable truth unfolding in front of him. That connection did not always come from perfection. Sometimes it came from shared silence, from wounds that did not need explaining. The staff member spoke gently from behind them, her voice careful not to disturb what was forming. "We can take him to the evaluation room. Give you some time to see how he responds." And Daniel nodded, his eyes still fixed on the dog now standing just outside the cage. Not fully relaxed, not fully certain, but no longer hiding, and that alone felt like something rare, something worth noticing. Lily slowly rose to her feet, her hand hovering near Rex but not gripping him, allowing him space to choose again. And when she took a small step forward, Rex hesitated only for a heartbeat before following, not because he was told to, not because he was trained to, but because somewhere in that quiet exchange, he had decided that this small, steady presence was something he did not want to lose. And Daniel, watching them take those first uncertain steps together, realized that this was not the beginning of something perfect. It was the beginning of something honest, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. The evaluation room was quieter than the hallway, softer somehow, with muted light filtering through a small window and the faint hum of an old ceiling vent circling above. And Daniel closed the door behind them with care, as if even that sound might tip the fragile balance that had followed them in. And Lily stepped forward slowly, counting the distance in her mind, one careful step at a time, while Rex lingered just inside the doorway, his body angled slightly toward the exit, not ready to fully commit, not ready to retreat, suspended between instinct and something new he did not yet understand. "Take your time," the staff member said gently before stepping out, leaving them alone in the room. And the silence that followed was not empty. It was watchful, waiting to see what would unfold without instruction. Daniel moved to the side, giving space, his hands resting loosely at his sides, resisting the urge to guide, to intervene, because he could feel it now. This moment did not belong to him. It belonged to something quieter, something that required patience more than protection. Lily stood still for a moment, listening, her breathing steady. Then she spoke softly into the space between them. "You can stay where you are," she said, not asking him to come closer, not asking him to perform, just giving him permission to exist without expectation. And Rex's ears shifted slightly at the sound of her voice, his eyes flicking toward her, then toward Daniel, then back again, mapping the room, mapping the distance. And slowly, cautiously, he took a step forward, then another, each movement deliberate, each inch earned. Daniel watched closely, not with the eyes of an officer assessing behavior, but with the awareness of a father witnessing something he could not teach. And he noticed the way Rex's gaze never left Lily for long, the way his attention returned to her, as if she were the only steady point in the room. Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out a small folded cloth, something worn and familiar, and she knelt again, placing it gently on the floor in front of her. "This is mine," she said softly. "So you know me." And Daniel felt his throat tighten slightly, because that simple gesture carried a trust that had not come easily, not after everything they had been through. And Rex lowered his head just enough to catch the scent, his nose hovering above the cloth before touching it lightly, drawing in the unfamiliar but calming trace of her presence. And something in his posture shifted again, not fully relaxed, but less guarded, less distant. Minutes passed without urgency, without commands, just small movements and quiet exchanges. Lily adjusting her position, Rex stepping closer, then pausing, then closer again, until the distance between them no longer felt like a barrier but a shared space. And Daniel realized that this was what the staff member had meant when she said Rex could not perform under pressure. Because here, in the absence of it, he was beginning to respond in a way no training program could measure. "Can we try walking?" Lily asked softly, turning her head slightly toward Daniel. And he hesitated for a brief second, the old instinct rising again, the need to ensure, to confirm. But then he nodded, even though she could not see it. "We can try," he said quietly. And Lily stood, her hand hovering near her side, not reaching for Rex, just leaving space for him to decide. And she took one careful step forward. For a heartbeat, nothing happened, the kind of pause that invites doubt. But then Rex moved, not in perfect alignment, not with practiced precision, but with intention, stepping forward just enough to stay beside her, not leading, not guiding yet, but choosing not to let her walk alone, and Daniel felt something shift again, deeper this time. Because this was not about a dog learning to guide. This was about a bond forming in real time. Imperfect, untrained, but real. And as Lily took another step, and Rex followed again, the rhythm between them began to take shape, slow, uneven, but steady. Like two broken pieces learning how to move forward together without needing to be whole first. The rhythm between them did not come all at once. It formed slowly. Like something learning how to breathe again after holding air for too long. And Lily took another step forward, her foot gliding carefully across the floor, her posture steady but cautious, while Rex moved beside her, not perfectly aligned, not trained into precision, but close enough to feel, close enough to matter, and Daniel stood near the wall, watching with a stillness he had not known he could hold, because every part of him wanted to step in, to correct, to guide, to make sure nothing went wrong, but something deeper told him that stepping in now would break something fragile that was just beginning to take shape. Lily paused, her head tilting slightly as she listened to the space ahead. Then she reached her foot forward again, testing, and Rex hesitated for a fraction of a second before stepping just ahead of her, his body shifting subtly to block her path toward the edge of a low training platform near the center of the room. Not with force, not with command, just presence. And Lily stopped immediately, sensing the change, her foot hovering before lowering back safely onto the flat floor. And Daniel felt his breath catch in his chest because that movement, that small, instinctive adjustment, was not something that could be easily explained away. Good job, Lily whispered, her voice warm and certain, as if she had seen exactly what happened without needing to see it at all, and Rex's ears flicked slightly at the sound, his posture softening just enough to show that he heard her, that her voice mattered. Daniel stepped forward slowly now, unable to stay back any longer, his eyes moving between them, searching for something he could name, something he could understand. He adjusted. He said quietly, almost to himself, and Lily nodded, a small smile forming again. He is listening, she replied, and Daniel felt something inside him shift again, something that had been rigid beginning to loosen. Because listening was not something you could force, it was something you chose, and Rex, a dog they said, could not respond, was choosing to listen. The room remained quiet, the outside world distant, and time seemed to stretch in a way that made each small movement feel significant. And Lily took another step, then another, her pace steady, her confidence growing with each moment, and Rex followed, sometimes a half step behind, sometimes slightly ahead, adjusting not by command but by awareness, by the subtle cues of her movement, her breath, her presence. And Daniel realized that what he was witnessing was not training being restored, it was trust being built, piece by piece, in a way that no structured program could replicate. After a few more steps, Lily stopped again, turning her head slightly toward where she felt Daniel standing. "Dad?" she said softly, and he stepped closer, his voice low. "I am here." And she nodded, then turned back toward Rex, her hand lifting. Slowly, hovering near his shoulder before resting lightly against his fur, not gripping, just connecting, and Rex did not pull away, did not flinch, he remained still, accepting the contact. And Daniel felt that moment settle deep inside him. Because it was not just the dog who was learning to trust again, it was his daughter, reaching out into a world she could no longer see, and finding something that reached back. "We are okay," Lily whispered, more to Rex than anyone else, and Daniel closed his eyes briefly, because those words carried more truth than anything he had been able to offer her in months. And when he opened them again, he saw it clearly for the first time, not as a risk, not as a mistake, but as something quietly right, something that did not need to be perfect to be real. And as Lily took one more step forward, and Rex moved with her, steady, present, and unafraid, Daniel understood that this was not a test they needed to pass. It was a beginning they needed to trust. They did not rush the moment. Not Lily, not Rex, not even Daniel, because something in the room had shifted into a slower rhythm, one that did not follow clocks or expectations. And Lily stood there with her hand resting gently against Rex's shoulder, her fingers barely moving, just enough to feel the rise and fall of his breathing, steady now, calmer than before, and Rex remained still beside her, not frozen, not withdrawn, but present in a way that felt new, as if he had found a place where he did not need to brace himself against what might come next. Daniel stepped closer, his boots quiet against the floor, and for a moment he simply watched them. The way his daughter stood with quiet confidence, the way the dog adjusted his stance to match her balance, subtle, almost invisible, but real, and it struck him that this was not something that could be measured in commands or tests. This was something unfolding in its own language. The door opened softly behind them, and the staff member stepped back into the room, her eyes moving carefully between Lily and Rex, observing without interrupting, and she folded her arms loosely as if giving space to what she was witnessing. "How is he doing?" she asked quietly, and Daniel hesitated. For a brief second, searching for the right word, something that would make sense of what he was seeing, but nothing felt accurate enough. "He is here," he said finally, and it was the simplest answer he could give, but also the most honest, because for a dog they said had checked out, being present was no small thing. Lily took another step forward, slower this time, her hand sliding slightly along Rex's shoulder as she moved, and Rex shifted with her, matching her pace, his body angled just enough to guide her around the edge of the platform again. Not perfectly, not with trained precision, but with care, and when she cleared it safely, Lily smiled again, brighter now. "He keeps me from bumping," she said softly, and the staff member's expression changed, just slightly, the kind of change that comes when expectation meets something it cannot easily explain. "That is not typical," she admitted, her voice thoughtful, and Daniel let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. Because nothing about this had been typical from the start. Rex paused then, his ears twitching at a distant sound from the hallway, a faint echo of movement beyond the door, and for a moment his body tensed, a flicker of that old guarded instinct returning, and Daniel felt it immediately, the shift, the hesitation, but before he could step in, Lily's hand moved slightly, resting more firmly against Rex's side, not pressing, just grounding. "It is okay," she whispered again, the same words she had used before, and Rex's tension eased, not all at once, but enough to stay, enough to choose not to retreat, and Daniel watched that small exchange with a quiet awe, because it was not control, it was connection, not dominance, but understanding. The staff member stepped closer now, her voice softer than before. "He has not responded like this with anyone else," she said, almost to herself, and Daniel nodded slowly, his gaze still fixed on Lily and Rex, because he could feel it too. This was not something they had created, it was something they had found. Lily turned her face slightly toward Daniel, her expression open, hopeful in a way he had not seen in a long time. "Can we take him home?" she asked, and the question hung in the air, simple but heavy, carrying all the uncertainty Daniel had been holding on to, all the risks, all the unknowns, and yet, as he looked at the dog who had been left behind and the daughter who had found him without sight, he realized that the answer had already been forming long before she asked, not in his mind, but in the quiet space where trust had begun to grow again, and for the first time since everything changed, Daniel did not reach for certainty, he reached for truth, and it was standing right in front of him, steady, imperfect, and real. Daniel did not answer right away, not because he did not know, but because he understood that some answers deserved a moment of stillness before they were spoken, and he looked at Lily, really looked at her, at the way she stood with quiet certainty, her hand resting lightly against Rex as if it had always belonged there. And then he looked at the dog, no longer hidden in shadow, no longer turned away, but standing beside her with a presence that was not perfect, not trained into shape, but real in a way that could not be ignored. The staff member waited patiently, her expression no longer guarded, but thoughtful, as if she too was reconsidering something she had once believed was settled, and Daniel let out a slow breath, the kind that comes when a decision is no longer something to fear, but something to accept. "Yes," he said quietly, and the word felt different than he expected, lighter, steadier, like it had been waiting for him to catch up to it. Lily's face softened into a smile that did not need sight to shine, and she leaned slightly closer to Rex, her fingers brushing gently along his fur. "We are going home," she whispered, and Rex did not move away, did not hesitate. He simply remained there, steady, as if the word home meant something he had not heard in a long time, but somehow still remembered. The process was simple after that. Papers signed, instructions given, the kind of details that usually defined a moment like this, but Daniel barely registered them. Because his focus remained on the quiet space where something had already changed, and when they stepped outside into the late afternoon light, the air felt different, warmer, carrying the soft scent of grass and distant traffic, and Lily paused at the edge of the sidewalk, her hand still near Rex, not holding, just trusting, and Rex stood beside her, his posture alert but calm, his attention tuned not to the noise of the world, but to the rhythm of her presence. Ready? Daniel asked gently, and Lily nodded, taking a small step forward, and Rex moved with her, not perfectly aligned, not leading in the way a trained guide dog would, but staying close, adjusting, aware, and as they walked, Daniel noticed something he had not seen before, not just in Rex, but in Lily, the way her steps grew more certain, the way her shoulders relaxed, the way her head lifted slightly, as if she was no longer walking through darkness alone, and Daniel felt something in his chest. Ease, something that had been tight for too long finally loosening its grip. They reached the car, and Daniel opened the back door, stepping aside as Lily guided herself closer, and Rex hesitated for only a moment before stepping in after her, settling quietly at her feet, his body angled protectively, not out of training, but out of choice, and Daniel closed the door gently, standing there for a second longer than necessary, looking through the window at the two of them, a girl who could not see and a dog who had been told he could not guide, sitting together in a silence that did not feel empty, but full of something steady and unspoken. He moved to the driver's seat, starting the engine, and as the car pulled away from the shelter, the world outside continued as it always had, cars passing, people moving, life unfolding without pause. But inside that small space, something quieter had taken root, something that did not need to be loud to be true, and Daniel realized, as he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Lily's hand resting gently against Rex's fur, that maybe they had not found what they were looking for that day. Maybe they had found something else entirely, something less certain, less perfect, but far more important, a reminder that being broken did not mean being lost, and that sometimes, the ones who cannot lead the way are the ones who teach you how to walk again. An officer searching for hope for his blind daughter walks into a quiet shelter expecting to find a perfect guide dog, but instead encounters a broken K9 hidden in silence. What begins as a simple visit slowly unfolds into one of the most touching animal stories where trust is not trained but felt, where a child who cannot see recognizes something no one else could, and where a wounded dog finds a reason to listen again. Through stillness, gentle touch, and unspoken understanding, the officer watches as his daughter connects with a German shepherd others had given up on, proving that not all healing comes from perfection but from presence. This emotional journey stands among the most powerful animal stories as it reveals how two lost souls can guide each other without commands, without expectations, only through quiet belief. As they take their first uncertain steps together, the officer begins to understand that strength is not always about control, and that sometimes the most reliable bond is the one built in silence. Among unforgettable animal stories, this one captures the essence of redemption, showing that even those considered broken can become exactly what someone else needs. With each moment, the blind daughter grows more confident, and the once withdrawn K9 learns to stay instead of retreat, creating a connection deeper than training. This story belongs to the most heartfelt animal stories where love replaces fear and patience replaces pressure, reminding us that healing is never one-sided. As they leave the shelter not with certainty but with trust, the officer realizes that the greatest guidance does not come from flawless ability, but from unwavering presence, making this one of those rare animal stories that linger long after the final moment, where broken does not mean lost, and where even the quietest bond can change everything. Character 1. A white American male police officer, age 38, rugged face, short brown hair, light stubble, wearing dark blue patrol uniform with badge, realistic texture, calm serious expression, front view portrait, cinematic lighting, no CGI, no illustration, no cartoon character 2. A German Shepherd K9, age 5, black and tan sable coat, amber eyes, lean muscular build, slightly cautious posture, full body visible standing, realistic fur detail, cinematic lighting, front view, no CGI, no illustration, no cartoon,